Okay, here we go. So today we are going to talk specifically about sales tax and tip. We're going to focus on those two, sales tax and tip. Tomorrow, next class, we'll talk about commission and then a faster way to figure out tax. Now, in the warm-up today, you guys noted, I asked you, hey, what do you think these are? And one of them was tip, one of them was tax, the other one was how we're going to round our answers. So, you actually already know how to do it. You did it in the warm-up. So let's get a rule for these things. I told you today that I'm going to be using the equation, but if you look at your notes on the next slide over, so you're looking at the first slide, look at the next slide over. Do you see the proportion? So those of you who prefer the proportion will look at that slide. Those of you who prefer the equation will look at this slide. I provided you with the proportion. I'm not going to do the proportion, but I will be showing the work from the proportion for each problem. So if you do the proportion and I do the equation, that's fine. I'll be showing you the work for it. I won't be doing it, but I'll be showing you the work. Does that make sense? It's kind of like when I say, hey, try this one, and then I just put it up there. So I will show you what the proportion should look like for every problem that we do today. That won't be true for tomorrow. I don't have every problem written as proportion. Today I do, though. So just be aware, the proportion is on the next slide, the equation is on this slide. So, no different equation, right? But what these letters mean is going to start evolving. A doesn't just mean amount anymore. P doesn't mean percent, and W doesn't mean whole. It's going to start evolving. So P doesn't stand for percent. P stands for percent of sales tax. It's important that now we assign what P stands for specifically. Because the P and the A, they are very closely related. W is going to be our purchase price or our original price, purchase or original price. And A is the amount of tax. So P and A always end the same. If P is percent of sales tax, A is the amount of sales tax, right? So if P is the percent of gray hair, what would A be?
The amount of gray hair.
Exactly. If P is the percent of people wearing glasses, what is A? Good. It's not just amount anymore. It's very specific to whatever the P is, whatever percent is. Okay? And here's how we find sales tax. It's actually pretty intuitive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up and solve an equation to find the sales tax. How do I do that? Round my answer to the nearest cent or hundredth like we did in the warm-up. This is the tax you pay. It's important that we understand that this is the tax you pay. Then if I want to find the total price, including tax, I take that amount of tax, which is the A, take the amount of tax, and add it to the purchase price, which is W. So this is like A plus W. You should probably be writing that down. It's hard to, it's small, but you can get it. So it's the amount of tax plus the purchase price. That's how we find the total price. That makes sense, right? You just take the price and then add the tax to it. That's what they do at the store. Right? When you get a receipt, you'll see the original price, then you'll see the price with tax. So let's just dive right in, okay? So, Austin purchased, yes, this is a little bit older, but not super old. Because the price of the game is a lot cheaper. You go to GameStop. Austin purchased a Madden 25 Xbox 360 game for almost $40. The sales tax in Fisher's is $7%. How much will you pay in tax? So first we want to find the tax, right? How much will you pay in tax? So we want to find the amount of tax, right? Now, like I said, if you want to do the proportion, feel free to set up the proportion while I'm doing the equation. The next slide, I'll show you what the proportion will look like. So what I want to do is I'm going to set up my equation. A equals P times W, where A is the amount of tax, P is the percent of tax, and W is the purchase price. So when I look at this number here, the $39.99, that's our W, because that's the purchase price. So I've got $39.99. What's the P? 7%, and that's where I have to be very careful. It's not 7% that I'm going to plug into my equation. Notice that the percent symbol has 2 zeros. That means I need to move the decimal point 2 spots, right? So this isn't 0.7, it's 0.07. Keep in mind that 7% as a decimal is this. Now, if you did the proportion, you wouldn't put 0.07, you'd put 7 over 100. And then we have A. So A, and you use your calculator. I need you guys using your calculator here. The more active you are with using your calculator, the faster the notes will go. The more actively engaged you are with your calculator. Harsukman, I need you to give me the unrounded version first. 7993. So now, what do I need to do? This is why I had you do this warm-up question. I need to look here at that digit and check this one. I'm going to look at the hundreds and check the one next to it. Am I going to round up or down? I'm going to round up. Why? Because 9 is greater than 5. So, the amount of tax is, Harsukman, one more time, $2.80. Now that's not the end of this question. The end of this question is what is the total cost? So how much am I going to pay in total? How do I do that? Well, I need to add tax plus purchase price. That's A plus W. A plus W. So what are my numbers that I need to add together? Luke. Good, $2.80 is how we would say that one. Keep going. So we would say $39.99. Yeah, that's fine. Keep going. And then Luke, that answer is, with your calculator, like I said, the more active you are with your calculator, the faster these notes will go. Just say the next number. $42.79. That's how much money you're going to need to take with you to GameStop. Right? $42.79. Questions on finding tax? This is really the only one that we're going to do. You only need really one example because it is the same every single time. So what did we do? We plugged in, if P was percent of tax, what was A? Amount of tax. So not total amount, right? If I plug in 0.07, am I going to get the total amount? No, I'm going to get a number that's way smaller than this. If the question just said, how much will you spend? You'll need to know that if you find the tax, you'll need to add that in, okay? Because tax is added on after the fact, okay? Questions on that? Here's what the proportion looks like for you to check your work for you proportion people. Here's what the proportion looks like. This is Mr. Baker's writing, so it's a little bit harder to see. A little bit more work in my opinion, but to each their own, okay? Questions, proportion people. All right, finding tip. So we found tax, now let's find tip. Tip is also called gratuity. Everybody say gratuity. Good, everyone say it with emotion. Gratuity. Doesn't that sound like a word? You should be like, yeah, it sounds like ratatouille. It sounds like a cool dish served warm, you know? All right, so gratuity. It is the percent of the bill that you give a person for providing service. Do you guys know who you tip? Waiters or waitresses, yep. Who else? Anybody else that you know that you tip? I don't know about that one. Car wash, somebody? Yeah? I've tipped a car wash person before if they did a great job. Hairdressers, people who cut your hair. They provide you a service. Who?
Like McDonald's, like the McDonald's people.
I don't think I've ever left a tip at McDonald's. My dad, my father-in-law leaves a $5 tip every time he goes and picks up a pizza.
Why?
I don't get it. But who should you tip? The delivery guy, because he's providing you a service, right?
That's what I meant.
Yep.
No, like, I doubt you do, but like, sometimes when you have like a dentist or something, I don't know if you can.
I'm not sure. A lot of times you tip people who do not make a salary. We'll talk about salary tomorrow. But a lot of times you tip hourly workers, people who are paid by the hour. And you especially have to leave a tip at a restaurant. In our country, waiters and waitresses make less per hour than everyone else. There is a minimum wage in our country. I think right now it's $7.25. Is It's very, very little. It's very little. Waiters and waitresses make significantly less than that. I think close to $3 per hour. That's because it's federally legal to pay them less because they make tips. Now, say what you will, if you like it or don't like that institution of tipping, it's around for good. You have to tip. So we're going to talk about when you tip. 15% is an average tip. If you got fine service, 15% is pretty average. If you got great service, typically you tip around 20%. If you got bad service, typically you would tip around 10%. You should never tip 0%. Keep in mind what I just told you. It is federally legal to pay them almost $3 an hour. So if they provided you a service, even if they did a bad job, they're only getting paid $3 an hour. All right, so a bad tip is 10%. Don't leave less than that. All right, so things to think about. Of course, these are up to you, but I'm just kind of giving you guys some world knowledge, some knowledge. Everybody say knowledge.
Knowledge.
Knowledge. All right, so 20% is typically really good. There was one time where I was feeling like, man, this guy did a really great job. I left him a 30% tip. Also, sometimes if you let's say you just go to let's say you get a Coke, and that's it. Sometimes you leave a larger tip. Okay, you're not going to leave a tip of 10 cents. That's not really helpful, is it? So a lot of times, you just keep in mind what kind of service you were given. Let's talk about how we can find tip. We already did that on letter A on the warm-up. So, tip, same way. But this time, it's not percent of tax. What is it? It's percent of tip. Okay, which means that the W is the price of your bill before tip, right? This would be before tip, price of bill before tip. If you need to write that down, write it down. And if P is the percent of tip, A is the
amount of tip.
Of tip. Notice it's not the total amount. That's a big mistake people make. They think A is the end. A is not the end. A and P are closely tied together. So whatever P is, A is. P is the percent of tip, A is the amount of tip. Okay? So how do we find it? Once again, set up your equation to find the amount of tip, right? So A equals P times W. Round your into the nearest hundredth, just like we normally do. That's the tip you're going to pay. To find the total cost, just like we found with the total tip, take your tip plus the bill. That'll be the total amount that you pay. Tip plus the bill. So we want to find 15% for each bill. Okay? So I'll do the first one, and then you guys will do the second one. Let's find a 15%, a pretty average tip. Let's find a pretty average tip. So, it says for each bill, which means we do them separately. Okay, separately. So 15%, that's our P, right? That's the percent of tip that we want to leave. Each bill would be W, so this would be W. You with me on that? That's the cost of your dinner. So you go out, you went to a nice fan, you went to Buca, you went to Buca di Beppo, you went to Maggiano's, you ate a nice meal, pretty expensive, right? With your large family. So now we set up our equation. A equals P times W. Now if you like to set up the proportion, feel free to set up the proportion. I'll show you the proportion after we're done with both of these problems. So A equals, why is it A equals? Because A is the amount of tip, right? So P is the percent of what? Percent of what? Of tip. So A is not going to be the total cost of the bill. So it's 0.15. What's W? 68.50. A equals 10.275. So that's not our answer, is it? We need to look at the hundredths place and look at the next digit over. Round up or round down? Round up. So our answer is what? How much tip should we leave? $10.28. That's how much tip we should leave. All right, I want you and your partner to do number 2. Talk through the steps together. If you're a proportion person and your partner's an equation person, you should be just checking your answers. Okay? Okay, set, go. You can pause the video here or skip ahead. Let me check a few buttons. Okay, all right, here it is. Do you see how the problems look exactly the same. What's the only difference?
Price.
The W. Anytime you find tax or tip, the structure should look exactly the same. Every problem should look exactly the same. That's just how it's going to be. Okay? You round this one up because 9 is greater than 5, so it'd be $4.73. Okay? Proportion, people, here's the proportion for the first one. I did not do the proportion for the second. This is how you would solve it. You cross multiply, divide by 100, you get this, round up. Now if you want to find the total price, you'd add it together. Okay? You don't have to do that. Okay? Now, the reality is, you're not going to leave this as your tip. You're not going to leave this as your tip.
You're gonna need $10,
Yep, you're not going to leave this as your tip.
$5.
Probably going to leave $5. Especially if you're working with cash, right? If you're working with cash, you're not leaving this. If you're paying with your credit card, yeah, you probably leave close to that. Probably leave, I don't know, like $10.25 or $4.75, because you can put that on my desk. These are weird numbers. You're not going to do that. You're just not going to, because when you're at the restaurant, you're probably going to estimate. Cell phone's dead, or your family has a rule: no cell phones at the dinner table. That's what my family has. We don't even get on our cell phone to calculate tip because we know how to estimate it. Okay? So how can we estimate? These are some very useful percents to pay attention to, right, Brenna? Cool. So let's be paying attention to this, because this slide is not on your notes. This is because we are thinking about them. All right? They're not on your notes because there's no writing involved. It's just to think about it. These are key percents to remember. 100% is the number. 50% is half of that number. 10% is you take the number and move the decimal place over one spot, right? Pretty easy. Okay. 5% is half of 10. Or if you cut the number in half, then move the decimal place over. That's how you find 5%. 1% is you move the decimal place over twice. So why do you think I have 10 and 5 in a different color? No. No, they're not the same. I like that idea. Cool.
Because 5 and 10 makes 15.
And an average tip is 15%. So how are we going to find that average tip without a calculator? And yes, without a calculator is what we're going to do. How are we going to find it? What should you do? And add them together. Add 10% plus 5% together. So, oh no, cell phone's dead. Gonna have to still figure out tip. Round your bill to the nearest dollar. That's what the first step is. Make it easier for yourself, right? Round your bill to the nearest dollar. So these are the same problems, right? So we already know the answers. So let's estimate and see if we can get pretty close. What would 68.50 be to the nearest dollar to make it easy?
69.
You sure you want to do $69? That's kind of hard to cut in half. Maybe we should use $70. It's a lot easier to cut in half, right? I say to the nearest dollar. What I really mean is to the nearest easy number. Okay? So I would round this to, not to $69, because then I'm using half dollars. I don't want to do that. Round to $70. Now I want to find 10% by moving the decimal one space over. So what's 10% of 70? That should be pretty easy. 10% of 70. $7. What's 5% of 70? Or another way to think about that, what's half of 10%? 5% is half of 10%. $3.50. So what should our tip be? 7 plus 350. We're writing this down because we're showing the thought process. Should be about what? $10.50. Is that close to our other answer? What was our other answer?
10.28.
$10.28. Is that close? Hands down, yeah. Absolutely. It's a little bit more than 15%, right? We know exactly what 15% is. It's $10.28. So if you leave $10.50 or if you leave $10, that's pretty darn close. I want you and your partner to talk through number 2. What should you round to? Find 10%, find 5%, find your tip. You know what your exact answer should be, so you know what your estimate should be. Talk to your neighbor. Start working this problem. Ready, set, good, go. Jason and Actually, you guys talk to each other. You guys pause the video here. So 50 cents is exactly right. That's what I would pay. When I go to the store, right, 10%, I rounded that to 30. Now, is this answer going to be a little less than 15% or a little more than 15%? It's a little less because I rounded down. Why is this one a little more than 15%? Because I rounded up. So if I wanted to, let's say I'm like, okay, well I rounded down a little bit, maybe I'll throw an extra quarter in there. It's up to you, of course. You know, this is approximately 15%. I actually think if we divided it, it'd be like 14.5%. So pretty darn close. Now, what if you had great service? What if you had great service? What could you do? Give 20%. How would you find 20%? Yeah, what would be 20% of this?
$6.
$6, right? Because it's 3 times 2. What would be 20% of this?
Oh, $14.
$14, right? 10% of that, and then double it. Now, if you want to make it a little bit more accurate, we get $6, maybe make it like $6.50. You know, because you rounded down. If you're doing great. Now, estimating is just that. It's getting a close value. Okay. Last problem, and I want you guys to do this with your partner. Check your work with me. You'll check your work up here. Is read this problem.
Olive Garden.
What is Olive Garden? Love me some Olive Garden. Give me that chicken Alfredo all day long. Give me that all day long. Because if I ate it all day long, I would probably be ill.
Yes.
Give me that chicken Alfredo for dinner. At a moderate pace. But notice what this problem is asking for. What's this problem asking for? The total bill. What does that mean? I need to find tax, and I need to find tip. So we need to find tax first, add it in. Notice, then I want to find tip. Here's the deal. You need to tip on your after-tax cost because your server, their income is taxed as well. So if you tip on the pre-tax amount, you're shorting them quite a bit of money. So you need to calculate tax and add it in. Then find the tip on that. Okay? So there will be 4 steps to this. I'll walk you through the first step. Step 1, find tax. Step 2, combine the bill and the tax. Now step 3, after you found the bill and the tax, you find the tip using step 2. Last and final step, combine step 2 and step 3 for the total. Now if we don't finish, I'm going to pass out your homework while you're doing this problem. Okay? So just take it and go. This is what I want you to be working on. Okay? So I know we have short time. Hey, guys, we still have 2 minutes. You should be working on this problem until the bell rings. Ladies and gentlemen, stop packing up. Continue working on this problem. You'll have plenty of time. As you get through each step, you can see what's going on. Here's the place where people make their mistake. Eyes up. When you're finding tips, so this is step 3. Step 3. Here's where they find their mistake. What mistake do they make?
They don't. They use the full 50.
They use the $40.50 and not this amount. Remember, I told you you need to tip on the after-tax amount. So you need to include tax when you're calculating your tip. Okay? So on a $40.50 tab, it will actually cost you almost $50. Okay? With tax and tip included. Okay?